first place baseball and staying up late at night, which usually means I brew a little post-dinner coffee. Alan McCallum will be up late with the first place Baltimore Orioles all weekend long and headed into next week with the Los Angeles Dodgers as Luke takes a couple of days off to dip his toe in the sands. Alan, what's going on? First place, July 4th. Come on. What's not to like about baseball apple pie in America this weekend, right?
It's not only first place. I mean, you're talking about a surging club right now. I mean, they've been tearing it up. And we saw, not for the first time, but certainly what this team looks like when they actually get good starting pitching and their offense is hot.
Did you say good or fair? What did you mean there? Decent, maybe. I mean, good? What is good? Is good 6 innings?
Maybe I'm extrapolating from what they've gotten so far. But yeah, good, I guess, meaning quality start.
When you hit the ball 17 times, you score 11 runs. Good's all relative, right?
And then you score 12 runs the next day. Ironically, the thing that's sort of faltered for them in the 2 late games in San Diego was the bullpen a little bit. Oliver Drake struggling and just trying to keep the Padres down. But by that time in both situations, the game had already gotten away from San Diego, and the Orioles were in great shape. And this is a club that's tied the home run mark for home runs in the month of June, which is impressive, but I mean, not something that is surprising. I mean, this is how this team scores runs largely. It was nice to see them score runs in some other ways as well in a big ballpark.
Hey, let me say something on that. If you would have told me in March that they would lead a month for the greatest home run month in the history of I'd say, okay, I'll buy that. I mean, if you would have told me that they would be in first place on 4th of July weekend, you would have had a tougher sell with me, especially if you would have shown me their starting pitching, right? Like if you just would have run down through the stats and say, well, Gallardo is going to stink or be unavailable. Jimenez is going to stink and be very available. Mike Wright was going to have an ERA of 6, and make every start. I would say, well, what part of 4th place do they own? That's what I would say.
Yeah, I hear you, but the other side of that is that Tillman's is in the midst of the best season he's had so far,
and it's still not. Let's not get crazy. I mean, he's got a 3.5.
Cy Young.
It's okay. I mean, it's good. It's good enough. Better than what we've seen for sure.
And that Tyler Wilson is still in the rotation because he's been fair. He's been bad on a few occasions and okay on others, but let's say fair. In Gosman, while not being a Cy Young, has been competent at the major league level, and you put in the fact that the offense has, with the exception of a few stretches, has produced runs, largely on the home run, and as guys cooled off, Machado and Trumbo early, then Davis and Jones, and then Scope and Davis and Jones. As some players have cooled off, others have really gotten it going. Rickard early, Kim later on. Wieters is you throw in there, who started off fairly cool. I mean, that's the way you want to get it done. You throw in the defense, particularly on the infield, and then that the bullpen has largely been one of the best in the game. I mean, it's all a matter of perspective. I mean, if you want to take the Orioles starting pitching in a vacuum and say, well, this is what they have, they absolutely should be in 4th or 5th place. But that's not the only component.
But, hold on. Machado's the best, among the best players on the planet. Trumbo's had a ridiculous year. Scope has been, for now, even better than we thought he was going to be. I mean, especially from an average standpoint. Defensively, I know we thought highly of him. We thought he'd be a run producer. A lot of things have gone right. And here come Davis and Jones, who have been 2 of the below the bar players most of the year, and now they're coming on. So, and Gallardo and Jimenez made successful starts against a AAA team, but successful. I'll take it.
Right. And let's be honest, and probably the thing that is the most important, and they've had some pitching injuries, but from an offensive standpoint, minus J.J. Hardy, this club's been really healthy. Even last season when they were undermanned, and I fully believe that. I mean, you look at how they lost J.J. Hardy, they lost Jonathan Scope. Wieters was unavailable through the first 4 months of the season, and then they nursed him along through it.
Yeah, the injuries are relative. Like, for you to say they haven't been hurt, Darren O'Day would disagree with you, and J.J. Hardy would disagree, and Adam Jones would certainly disagree back in April. And, but these have been blips, and they've, other than O'Day and Gallardo as well, they've gotten the guys back, right? And gotten it's different than he's gone for the year, Schwarber, Nate, well, Strasburg's not gone for the year, but if Tillman were to go down now, this boat would stall very quickly, as Seattle has learned, quite frankly.
2 years ago, the Texas Rangers had something like 15 players from their 25-man rosters on opening day on the DL through the course of the season for periods of like 3 to 4 months at a time. I mean, they were decimated. We've seen the Tampa Bay Rays have that on occasion. The Oakland A's in years past have had situations like that. I mean, it's not hard to look around when teams get hurt and understand why they're completely out of it.
Well, you always say wins above replacement, and you use the replacement word. What is the replacement? If the replacement is Ryan Flaherty for Hardy and bump Machado over and not miss much defensively, and it's for 3 weeks, you can live with that. But if it's Felix Hernandez and Steve Johnson's making those starts or whatever,
right.
And then down the line, what it does to everything else about your pitching, boy, that's not good.
Whatever you think about Adam Jones, I mean, the way he plays defensively, if he goes out, this club is in trouble because suddenly the kind of players you're playing in the outfield don't complement each other the same way as they do when Adam's in the lineup. And let's be honest, Adam Jones, this is who he is, right? For as bad as he can look for a while, he's got 50 RBIs. I mean, I looked at that the other day and I was like, that is not possible. He was so awful early in the season. He had 7 or 8 RBIs in April. And you contemplate that and that he has 50 now, and most of them have come from the leadoff spot.
Yeah, where he's batting behind, Paul Yanish or whatever at various points, right?
Or Ryan Flaherty. I mean,
right.
It's really astounding how productive he's been here in the month of June and late May. There's no question that they're staying healthy for the large part. Yes, I know that Darren O'Day is absolutely missed, and that this offense has really produced in a way that I don't think even we could have considered going through coming out of spring training. And again, I mean, just in terms of first place, as good as the Red Sox have been, as hot as the Blue Jays got over the last, let's say, mid-May to mid-June, the Yankees and the Braves have never really done that. The competition is mediocre, and the Orioles have been better than mediocre, and that's how they put themselves in the situation they're in right now.
Alan McCallum joining us here, talking all things first place Baltimore Orioles as they head to Seattle. Get back to the Birds in a minute. Let's talk about the Mariners, and I guess this is the next referendum on Nelson Cruz and Mark Trumbo to some degree. Certainly the Adam Jones, Chris Tillman thing, and I've talked to a couple people in Seattle that still has some sore feelings about all that. These two franchises have been a little intertwined on some pretty major players. They would look a lot better with Mark Trumbo. We would look a lot better with Nelson Cruz.
Well, see, I'm not sure that Mark Trumbo would be having this season in Seattle. First off, Seattle is a place where offensive players go to die. And it's a ballpark that swallows up home runs. They've been better this year, but you ask Aiden Beltre about where his career went when he was in Seattle. When he ended up in Boston for 1 year, it was like the light just exploded in him, and he's continued that into Texas. Even as he's gotten older, he's not quite the player he was, but he's been an incredibly productive player. But starting out in Los Angeles, going to Seattle, and then going to Boston, Texas, there's a huge black hole in his career, and it's right where he was in Seattle. Sean Figgins, going from Anaheim to Seattle, and he completely disappeared as a player. I don't know why. It's a big ballpark. It's certainly a pitcher's ballpark. It's not a home run-friendly ballpark, but a lot of players go there and completely fall apart. Now, Robbie Cano went to Seattle, leaving the Yankees, I assume, obviously for the money, one, but also to sort of take the lead to not have to, couch out a Derek Jeter. And he's having a good year now, but his first couple of years have been relative disappointment.
Yeah, he had an illness last year that one of the Seattle guys was explaining a little bit more about to me. And then there's the part where Cruz came in and they've become best pals, And
Right.
I think that aside, and look, this has nothing to do with me being Venezuelan or Latin or having any affinity because I know there are huge cultural differences between Latin clubhouses and non-Latin clubhouses and the way players interact with the world and each other. And Nelson Cruz was a guy who came here under incredible scrutiny after the PEDs and all that stuff, but left here as a very well-liked, respected guy. And
Absolutely.
I can't believe they let a person of that magnitude go when they have a young buck like Machado, a young guy like Scope as part of the Orioles Latin contingent that really would have been a great influence around here for a couple of years and a hell of an investment of $56 million if you thought you were going to give Chris Davis $161 million a year later.
It's the money's all relative, right? That you look at the money he got and they say, oh, we can't pay that. That's unrealistic. But it looks like a bargain now. I'll say to you again, I mean, the thing that always stood out to me is that they gave Ubaldo 4 years, and they gave him 1 year. And I think that everyone would have agreed that if they'd flipped that, it would have been very different. And I think Nelson would have signed here for 4 years at that time, largely because his age. I think that 1 year difference coming off of a 1 year contract would have been much more palatable for the Orioles. He's not having the year that he had the first 2 years here, one in Baltimore and then one in Seattle. He was an MVP candidate in both of those years, and he's having a good year. I mean, he's got 20 home runs, don't get me wrong, but you can see it slowing down a little bit. So
I'd rather have him than not have him. I'd rather have him than Kim or Rickard, right? I mean, and I understand the money side of it. There's not enough money for everybody, according to Mr. Angelos. But, for me with Cruz, and the other part was Markakis, and I'm all in and was from the very beginning that they shouldn't have given Nick Markakis that kind of dough, especially if they had concerns about his neck, and he's clearly not been that kind of a producer in Atlanta. But they were clubhouse guys. They were guys you wanted on your baseball team, and
Right.
and maybe Trumbo is too. Maybe they would say Trumbo's been a great addition to the mix of human beings we have here. And ask the Nationals about the problems they had last year with human beings, and that hasn't been as much of a problem in this clubhouse that we're aware of. But Cruz would have really filled a huge character issue need that would have helped them for the money they were spending. And that's the part that disappointed me the most.
I don't disagree with you at all. Now, here's what I would say. If you tell me you'd rather have Nelson Cruz than Mark Trumbo, I buy that. But to say that you'd rather have him than Rickard and Kim, I totally disagree with. Because, as we know about the Orioles, they've got plenty of boppers. They've got plenty of guys to do that. Kim and Rickard have filled an important void, largely that Nick Markakis filled in and has disappeared. They needed guys who would get on base,
sure,
and be productive. Because if it's all a lineup of 8 or 9 guys that are going to strike out and hit home runs, it's a different thing.
Opposed to 6 or 7 guys that strike out and hit home runs.
Well, yeah, I mean, it does make a difference. Look, their offense was really productive early on when Rickard was hot and getting on base. He wasn't hitting a ton of home runs. He was getting on base and scoring runs. Then he disappeared. And it was in that period of time when the offense really struggled. And he was not the only reason, but it was a significant piece. Then they put Kim in the lineup, and as Kim has gotten consistently into the lineup, we've seen them start to score runs again. So, I mean, having guys that are involved in getting on base and having good at-bats and spraying the ball around, it's hard to shift on these guys. That makes a difference in a lineup like this. We talked about it in terms of the Astros and the Cubs, that both of the teams are very similar. They strike out a lot. They hit a lot of home runs. But the Cubs made a conscious effort in the offseason to add players that get on base. Hayward and Zobrist, who, in amongst the big boppers, are interested in getting on base and in making the lineup work, and where the Astros did not. And they spent a lot of the beginning of the season trying to score runs, to produce runs where they couldn't. So Don't sleep on Rickard and Reimold and Kim and the contribution that they make, because it is important to have guys on base, even if they're not scoring runs or being on when the home runs are being hit. If they're forcing pitchers to work. If they're forcing pitchers
But they've been a better version of most of the Nate McLeod, Felix P.A. We've been through a litany of these guys. This is, and they are in first place, and they are getting up on 20 games over 500 at the All-Star break. All three of those guys have been very, very good. But, come on, let's not compare that to Nelson Cruz. Come on. And I understand how much money they would have had to spend it on. Look, I'm not going to, play the revisionist history part of it, but we're going to see Nelson Cruz for 4 days, and I think it's worth pointing out that the Orioles passed on him, and they've made good and bad decisions in free agency. I just thought all along that was a very, very curious one that still stands to be pretty curious to me.
I would like to have Nelson Cruz as an Oriole. I'm just telling you that if it's Nelson Cruz and Mark Trumbo in the lineup, it's a very different team, and it's not as, I would tell you that, in my opinion, they would not be as offensively productive, because you'd have the same type of guy in the lineup all over the place, and that is not necessarily the best situation for a baseball team.
Alan Callum joining us here talking Oriole baseball. Birds headed out to Seattle for the holiday weekend. I hope everybody has great hot dogs, hamburgers. If you're listening out on the beach like Billy Ehrman, have a good time wherever you're going. We're hanging out here. I'm getting my WNST Rock Week together for the week of July 11th. We'll make sure we check that out. All right, so an issue for the weekend, and this is two-prong, Alan. So, and I've talked to several people about that, and because I'm feeling breezy and the Orioles are in first place, and I feel like talking about some real baseball here this weekend. Felix Hernandez, not a part of this weekend for Seattle. Kershaw will not pitch against the Orioles at Dodger Stadium. Part of this thing is a measure of good fortune, good luck, and where it is. And now that Gallardo is back, and say what you want about Jimenez and him having rocks between his ears, and I'm all for that. And there would be a long line of people from Cleveland and Colorado and beyond who would say that, but they're healthy. And, part of this, as we pointed out earlier in missing games and where the health is, when they're missing other teams' number one starters, when Steven Strasburg has, arm issues and questions and going to the DL and all of that, the overall pitching in Major League Baseball and the health of that is always a very, very delicate balance. But we've really seen it come to pass here that the Orioles are going into the All-Star break where they have had Gausman out there, had Tillman out there, and other teams aren't going in that direction right now. And it's a real concern for any of these teams that, you're in first place 1 minute, you lose King Felix, you're 500 at the All-Star break, and your season's on the brink.
Yeah, look, certainly the first time the Orioles saw Seattle in Baltimore, they were far healthier than they are right now. And you're right. You have Hernandez on the shelf, and you're pitching Wade Miley on a semi-regular basis. It makes a significant difference for a club, particularly when you're playing in a ballpark like Safeco. Their line, their rotation, Iwakuma it's not what he was. He's okay. The Orioles would certainly like to have his numbers, but they certainly aren't Cy Young-like. And the rest of the rotation, Paxton has been okay. They're absolutely missing the number one. And you're right. If Tillman were to go down for the Orioles, it would be a disaster right now, because he sort of anchors what happens here. Being able to make each start makes a difference. If Clayton Kershaw's back for the Dodgers proves to be a serious ailment and not just a blip,
they're done.
They're in some real trouble. They're in real trouble. They're probably not going to catch the Giants as it is, because their rotation is sick, and offensively they're singing on all cylinders, even without Hunter Pence, which surprises me. So they're probably not going to catch the Giants, but they were certainly look to be good enough to be in line for a wild card spot, and that could completely disappear if they have to put Clayton on the shelf for any period of time.
Well, that also opens the doors for the Marlins of the world, right? For other teams that are out there. Look, the Marlins are coming now. The Astros are coming. It looks like the Indians are here. It looks like the Rangers aren't going anywhere. And from our perspective, I keep hearing the numbers. If the Orioles just play 500 ball the rest of the year, they'll win 90 games. What's going to happen to the Red Sox and the Blue Jays, and what's going to happen to the trading deadline, and who's going to be out there and who's going to be buying and selling? It really is a curious year, and as the Orioles sit on top of this, this unfolds to be an exciting couple of months because the Orioles aren't going out of this thing anytime soon, from what I can tell. I'm just wondering how far in the Red Sox and the Blue Jays are going to go in Ortiz's last year, in a walk year for all the bats of the Blue Jays. You know, I hate to sing some Elvis to you here on 4th of July weekend, but it is now or never for some of these franchises.
Well, so, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I told you that I believe that Doug Fister was going to be on the trading block for the Houston Astros.
And you wanted him all along.
Absolutely. And he was starting to pitch well, but the club looked like it was going nowhere. And suddenly, you know, Seattle's dropped back, and they're in second place, and the Angels are in last place in the West, and they look prime for a wild card spot. So he's probably not going to go anywhere unless their fortunes change again before the trade deadline. But the flip side of that is that Arizona, who went all in on Greinke, who's now having oblique issues, so they don't know when he's going to be ready again, and Shelby Miller, who hasn't been anywhere near what they would have hoped for, and they're nowhere near contending. Maybe they trade Shelby Miller, and someone picks him up on strength of potential to get back or try to replace some of those building pieces that they lost in going out to get him. I still believe Jeremy Hellickson is probably going to be on the trading block for the Philadelphia Phillies. Not having a great year, but not having a horrible one, and has pitched well in the past in the American League East. So you sort of look at that and say maybe that's someone the Orioles would target. But the way the wild card is set up now, it is very different than it was, say, 5 years ago, where if you are a Pittsburgh, for example, and you're 3 games under 500, there doesn't look like any reality that you're going to get into the postseason. But with 2 wild card spots to chase, 3 games under 500 is not a horrible thing if you think all we need to do is get hot for a while, and we can make this happen. You mentioned Miami, same situation, right? I mean, this is a team that you look at and say, even 5 years ago, even if they're in second place, you say, what's the reality that we're going to be able to maintain this? And they might trade some pieces off. But with 2 wild card spots, anything's possible. So, you know, what it does now is make teams believers in themselves for a little longer than they used to be. And then you have to sort of look yourself in the mirror on the last day before the trade deadline and say, what's the reality here? And so I think you might see a flurry of movement at the 25th hour, so to speak. But it's going to be a while. I'd be surprised if there are any early trades before at the All-Star break from clubs like this, unless it's a Cincinnati or an Atlanta, and they clearly aren't going anywhere, and they need to sort of recoup some pieces.
Alan McCallum talking all things Orioles baseball and, a weekend in Seattle, a weekend in L.A., and off to a hell of a start in San Diego, right? So, good tidings all the way around, and it appears right now they will be the first-place team at the All-Star break, right? I mean, it's good. The magic number's getting better on that, and certainly the kind of competition they're seeing and not seeing these number 1 starters get a little home cooking against a really bad Angels team next weekend. They can really get it going right now, man.
I haven't seen Boston or Toronto's schedule going through the All-Star break, but the Orioles is not so scary that it makes me think that they have a chance to really go into slide. Now, God knows things happen, but I would be surprised if going into the All-Star break this team's not in first place, or at least has a share of it. The Red Sox have shown themselves to be resilient through the course of the season, but looking at a 5.5 game lead right now, looking at a team that's really playing on all cylinders and is relatively healthy, it would be a hard thing in a fairly short period of time to see them lose first place right now. So,
Red Sox have the Angels, the Rangers, and the Rays over the next week and a half. And I'm doing a little number here on the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays have Cleveland for the weekend right now, and then, which, that's not easy right now. Neither is Texas. So, I mean, right off the bat, I'll tell you their schedules are more difficult. They have Cleveland, Kansas City, and Detroit, the Blue Jays do. So they're going through the hard part of the Central right now.
They really are. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so, yeah, I mean, again, you can look at schedules, you can look at statistics and say this is going to happen, and you'd be absolutely wrong half the time. But the Orioles have been really, they have not sustained any large losing streaks through this season.
And 7-game winning streaks that we have never seen before, quite frankly.
Yeah, again, I mean, Buck, through the last few years, the story of Buck is that, they'll win 3 games, they'll win 4, they'll lose 1 or 2, and that's how they've kept themselves going. But the only real winning streak to speak of in this time where they've returned to respectability was in 14 after the All-Star break, where they just going out on the West Coast and they just went wild for about a month. And really solidified their hold in winning the American League East. We haven't seen this from them, where for 3 or 4 weeks at a time in different points of the season they just can't lose. And you start to look at the juggernaut. Now they don't have starting pitching enough to say that, but there's some good stuff working on this club. There really is, and it makes you believe that they can weather storms, barring injury. Now that speaks nothing to the postseason. That speaks in no way to the postseason. And if they really want to think about getting deep in the postseason, they need to make some moves or decisions about starting pitching. But this team is certainly poised. They're in a situation right now where someone has a nagging tweak or something along those lines. Darren O'Day, for example. I mean, some teams might rush to get him back in with a weird high hamstring injury. But they're not in a situation right now where they have to rush him back. They can let him get healthy.
And they can let Brad Brock go off to San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And in terms of like Kevin Gausman, and Gausman missed the first month, and in some ways that might have ended up to be a blessing in disguise.
Well, same thing with Adam Jones and getting himself sorted out in April at some point so that he can hit the ball like he's been hitting it in June, right?
Right. So, I mean, you're looking at a club that may have, at least right now, they have enough sort of cushion that if they have some injuries they need to nurse, they can find a way to take care of it, either on the DL or just resting a guy, sitting him on the bench for a little while so that they can figure it out. They've got some cushion to do that. And in a 6-month season where you're grinding every day, that is not a bad position to be in at all.
Alan, have you ever been to Dodger Stadium?
I have not.
Yeah, I know you've been to but you've been to San Francisco, right?
I've been to Oakland. I've been to San Francisco. I've been to Seattle out on the West Coast.
Wow. All right. See, this would have been a really good trip to recommend for people. Like if you want to do something cool, go to L.A. for the 4th of July, chill out down in Manhattan Beach or Redondo, and go up and check the Orioles and the Dodgers out where, our creator meant for baseball to be played in Chavez Ravine,
I think Jackie Robinson and the Brooklyn Dodgers fans might have something to say about that.
Yeah, but, so would the people, the indigenous folks of Chavez Ravine, if you've done. Google that one, by the way. Hey, man, I appreciate the comeuppance here in the first place conversation. We haven't had a lot of first place conversations over the years, especially on the hot summer days, Alan. So, I'll take it. I'll take the late nights this weekend in Seattle, as well as the Orioles at Dodger Stadium, and I'll look forward to talking some baseball with you after the holiday, man.
I'm looking forward to being in first place with the Baltimore Orioles the next time we have a conversation, and the one after that as well.
Any Oriole-Dodger thing at Dodger Stadium kind of makes the hair stand up for the Louis Aparicio thing, right?
You would certainly think so.
Hey, we have the 66 celebration coming up next weekend, too, with the Orioles Hall of Fame luncheon and all that good stuff with Aunt Pat. So I'll have that stuff for you next week, too. So there.
My dad tells me stories about walking downtown after the Orioles won in '66 and seeing the Dodgers, loading out from their hotel and crying on the street side, saying they couldn't believe that it happened the way it did. So, good stories.
One day I'll jump higher than Brooksy did off the mound in that one, right?
You might be too old for that these days, Ness.
Alan McCallum. Hey, I got good knees, though. I mean, my knees are fine, man. I'm doing yoga. Alan McCallum, Alan at WNST.net. You can find him as well as his band, E.M. Spencer, out on Facebook and all that good stuff. You can find me in the Baya Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. I'm chilling out through the holiday. I'll be out on social media. You can also email me, nasty at WNST.net. Won't be doing any more Facebook Live over the weekend or WNSTV, YouTube stuff. Going to take a little down period here and get it all sorted out, watch the Orioles, and get my WNST Rock Week stuff together. Been editing stuff down. I've been going through the roll call of all the stuff I've already got in the hopper around here, but it's pretty good. From the Black Crowes and Daryl Hall and Billy Joel and David Bowie and Clarence Clemens and all sorts of good stuff. Stuff I even forgot that I did, quite frankly. Lou Graham, the guys, the bassist from Heart. It's good stuff. You'll dig it. I'm editing it down. the week of July 11th. The hashtag is WNST Rock Week. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.